Hey everybody, it is me here, Mr. Truth, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 more pretty bad and basically scrub quarterbacks that have come through the ranks of the NFL over the last 10 years at least. This time it's a bit more exclusive. It's in like sort of a 5 to 6 to 7 year time frame and time period, except for the exception of one quarterback on today's top 5 list here in this video. So no more fooling around, no more kidding around. You guys seem to like the last one, got over 2,000 views in like a day or two. So thank you guys for the support on that video. Without further ado, let's get straight into this top 5 list. All right, so rolling in hot here at the number 5 spot on this list is quarterback drafted in 2020 out of Iowa, drafted by Minnesota with the 244th overall selection. It is Nate Stanley. Comes into the 6'4", 230-something frame, and this guy never took a snap in the NFL. Now, his arm talent was pretty decent. He obviously had that NFL size and frame you look for in a good quarterback, but unfortunately, it was never meant to be for Nate because he just wasn't all that good. His college stats were decent. He was never really a super good quarterback that would consider, any sort of high draft selection. That's why he was picked in the 7th round of the NFL draft in 2020 in a pretty highly touted quarterback draft class. Obviously, the guys like Burrow, Tua, Hurts, Love, Herbert, all those guys that are really, really good NFL quarterbacks. He was definitely not amongst those ranks of the good quarterbacks in this class. Was seen more as like on the level of guys like, not even really Jacob Eason, more like guys that were like lower on draft boards, such as a guy like a Jake Luton and a Anthony Gordon, who was a quarterback out of Washington State who put up some nice numbers in an air raid Mike Leach sort of scheme in college. And for Stanley, it was never meant to be. He didn't really have any skills that would translate well over into the pros, and he never took a snap. And it's probably going to be super duper hard for me to find any fucking highlights of this guy playing in an NFL uniform. Maybe he played some preseason snaps or something. I have no freaking idea. But Nate Stanley, not really a tragic story, but not a story that, had the greatest ending. He never really stuck at the NFL level. He was number 5 on today's list. Oh boy, this one's definitely going to be an interesting one because some of you probably remember this guy. I'm talking about Nate Sudfeld, who was drafted in the 6th round by Washington in the 2016 NFL draft class. And he's been on a couple teams. He's been on teams like Detroit and teams like Philadelphia, but he's most known for an infamous game, which is like one of the last games, it's not the last game of the season, in 2020, in the COVID sort of pandemic year in 2020 in the NFL, where he replaced, I believe, Jalen Hurts, who now is a Super Bowl champion. Congrats to him. In like the final quarter of the game against a divisional opponent, I think it was either Dallas or Washington. It didn't really matter because the Eagles were not in any sort of playoff race whatsoever. So I think Coach Doug Peterson put Sudfeld in just to tank so they can ensure a loss, so they don't accidentally beat their in-division opponent and get a worse draft selection. And I believe it ended up working out for them. And that's really all that Sudfeld's ever been known for, is being thrown in the COVID year as just a scrub to tank for a higher draft pick for Philadelphia. He was never good. He has a good frame. He doesn't have, this guy has no arm. He has a fucking cream puff arm. He's not really great at reading defenses. This is a guy who's just a classic scrub quarterback. I know he's a 6th rounder with no expectation, but the fact he sticked in the league for like 6-7 years almost is mind-boggling to me. And it's sort of crazy how a quarterback that's that staggeringly sort of bad can stay in the league for that long while having no redeeming qualities of his game whatsoever. His career stats, they look decent. I mean, 67 completion rate, 180-something yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. That looks decent, but those stats are lying. This guy was a scrub, and he never saw the field because he was a terrible quarterback who shouldn't have been there to begin with. So that was number 4 on this list, Nate Sudfeld. Back-to-back Nates, by the way. All right, so it seems like we're getting down to it in this list. Coming in hot at number 3 on this list, it is quarterback Jake Fromm. Stands at 6'2", 215 pounds, I believe. He was another guy in the 2020 NFL draft class that was selected in the 5th round, this time by Buffalo, although he never really stuck on Buffalo. I think there was some sort of scandal surrounding his name, and he got caught or he got traded or released or something, and the Giants in 2021 decided to give him a flyer, give him a chance to pick him up to be an active roster quarterback, and like a couple weeks into the season, he was sort of thrust into a game, and he was just, 2 games actually. He started 2 games in the NFL ever in his career. And to say this guy was terrible would be an understatement of the millennium, and maybe even of the century, maybe even of life itself. This guy was actually, my voice sounds monotone and lifeless and pretty pretty fucking dead right now because I don't know what to say about Jake Fromm. He just, I sort of remembered the guy in the back of my head, and I was like, wow, this would be a good guy to put in one of these videos. So here he is live in living color, Jake Fromm. He is most infamously known for being the guy who was a part of the infamous 3rd and 9 quarterback sneak play when Joe Judge was still the coach of the New York Giants in 2021. Had that like horrible season where they won 4-something games. They were just straight trash in 2021. And, you know, Joe Judge was one of the worst coaches I've ever seen in the NFL. I mean, he just was so stupid. It's unbelievable. How that man managed to keep that job in New York for that long is fucking mind-boggling. I don't even know. When Jake Fromm was a scrub, his career stats read something like this: 45 completion percentage, an 0-2 record, 3.5 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions for his dismal starting NFL career. Just pathetic. This guy was someone who should have never been thrown in the game to begin with, someone who should have never been on an active NFL team's roster at all, but there he was. He was on the field. He got 2 starts, and he was a scrub in basically both of them. So that was number 3 on this list, Jake Fromm. Number 2 on this list is somebody who I thought was going to be pretty good in the NFL. Someone I thought was going to go in like the 2nd to 3rd round maybe of the NFL draft, but, you know, he just never panned out in the NFL. I'm talking about Jacob Eason, who was drafted by the Indianapolis Colts in the 4th round of the 2020 NFL draft class. Once again, a lot of these guys in the 2020 draft class in the later rounds, like the last couple of rounds of the draft, just never worked out and never did anything significant at the NFL level. And Jacob Eason was one of them. This guy was huge, 6'6", 230 pounds, great frame, decent athleticism for his size, rocket-like arm, has everything you need for a starting quarterback in the NFL. It's just this guy was never made to be a quarterback in the NFL. It's really that simple. It's that easy. Sometimes you can't overcomplicate shit. And with the career of Jacob Eason, you can't overcomplicate his career. You can't say he wasn't given a fair chance. You can't say anything because he was not good enough to get on the field. And when he got on the field, he was never good. And he only made a couple like relief appearances where he threw a couple passes, and he threw 2 interceptions to 0 touchdowns with 84 yards and a 50 completion rate in his career. He only threw 10 career passes. That's how bad that Jacob Eason was. And this is a guy I thought would be actually a really solid NFL quarterback because of his physical tools and traits. And I was sort of caught up in the size and the frame and the arm talent, all that came with sort of Jacob Eason as a prospect. And I sort of forgot along the way when I was sort of watching him on film in 2020 that this is a guy who, you know, couldn't really cut it at Georgia, couldn't win the starting job, so he had to go to Washington. Wasn't even that good at Washington, but he had good physical traits. He wasn't really good at reading defenses. He wasn't good with accuracy. His decision-making left a bit to be desired, so I sort of ignored all that because he had the frame, he had the arm, he had everything that you need in a star quarterback. And you know, I've sort of learned from that experience scouting Eason because now, I mean, I don't even buy quarterbacks like this anymore. I used to buy the shit out of him back, you know, when I was a bit younger. And now I'm just, guys like this, they're a dime a dozen because they come and go as fast as a blink of an eye. Like, you know, 1 year they're in the NFL, now they're in the Arena League, or they're at a car, they're working at a car dealership, or they're working at a fucking McDonald's or something like that. So that was number 2 on this list, Jacob Eason. All right, folks, it's time to figure out who the big dog at number 1 on this list is going to be, and it's going to be quarterback Will Grier. He was drafted by the Carolina Panthers in the 3rd round of the 2019 NFL draft. It was a pretty weak draft class for quarterbacks, if we're being honest. Coming out of West Virginia, put up some really good numbers in that West Virginia offense and looked good. Looked like he could be some, you know, decent sort of maybe average starter one day in the NFL. In his first season in the NFL in 2019, he got 2 starts and he went 0-2. He didn't throw a touchdown. He threw 4 interceptions. He threw for a combined 228 yards, 4.4 yards per attempt. He was just abysmal. He didn't even throw a touchdown. He threw 4 picks. I mean, the guy was awful. And this is an example of a quarterback who rode his college hype to a 3rd round draft selection and never did anything meaningful at the NFL level. He's bounced around a couple teams as a 3rd stringer and as a backup and as a taxi squad type of quarterback. But let's be honest, for a guy drafted in the 3rd round, that is absolutely not the career you want. Being known as the 3rd string practice squad guy that gets cut and only really gets any sort of minutes whatsoever in the preseason. You don't want to be remembered as that guy in the NFL. You don't. You just simply don't. And Will Grier is one of the guys who is going to be remembered down the road as a guy who, couldn't cut it in the NFL because he wasn't good enough and he was just bouncing around practice squads and couldn't find a home, couldn't find a team that really cared enough to keep him on their active roster. And you could say it's a sad story and all that stuff, but Will Grier, once again, he's another guy. He didn't have the skills to pay the bills. He played in a bit of a gimmicked up West Virginia offense in college and put up some nice numbers, but he was undersized. He wasn't even really that mobile. We ran like a 4.8 something 40, so he wasn't that quick. He had no arm strength. He wasn't really accurate. He's a guy who really didn't have anything that would indicate that he could be a franchise NFL quarterback. He was picked in the 3rd round. The Panthers were hoping they could get their quarterback of the future in Will Grier, and they swung and they missed, and they struck out big time by picking Will Grier in the 3rd round in 2019. And thank you all for watching this video. And by the way, new microphone, if you couldn't already sort of tell from the quality. I'd say it's pretty distinguishable and discernible from my phone mic. So rest in peace to the phone microphone. I will never be using that for a video again unless this mic breaks, which hopefully it never, ever breaks. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of make another top 5 list of bad quarterbacks that have sort of been flew under the radar the past couple of years. And I might make more of these lists because I really enjoy making them. So... And that's going to be all for this video. Thank you all for watching. This has been Mr. Truth, and this was nothing but the truth.